yeah, I decided I would go on another nerd deep dive on camera lenses just because I want to. So I'm gonna put on my, director of photography sleeve tattoos and leather vest, and I'm gonna try to find if I was gonna, actually pony up thousands of dollars for a cinema lens kit, that would be my like working kit. Um, maybe not highest level stuff, maybe not like $100,000 kit, but like a kit that I would spend the money and spend the effort to really research and make sure that it's like the perfect for what I want to do, which is its own sort of rabbit hole by itself, and I want to sort of walk through that with my notes. But because cinema lenses, especially, it's such a niche thing. Like camera lenses are camera lenses, but cinema lenses, because they're so much more expensive, they're so much more difficult to manufacture, and it's a niche world. They tend to be really good at one thing, cinema lenses, but not good at everything. Whereas you can pick up, like a Canon L glass lens, and you kind of know what you're getting. Whereas cinema lenses is a lot more complicated. Cook lenses have a specific look. Zeiss lenses have a specific look. Red primes exist in the world, like all that kind of stuff. And there's everything in between. There's a bunch of different versions of Zeiss lenses. Sigma makes a bunch. Rokinon still has lenses in that world that I don't know if I would say have the same quality or character as those. But yeah, so let me walk through my shopping list before I start doing this, and maybe we'll try to find a matching set. So let's just go ahead and start with the wants. The big want is obviously the lenses that can do it all, which is not really possible. But my logic is, if you need to, if you can have these lenses as like a starting point, and then you can do things to modify them to change them to what your production needs. And so in the same way, you need a light, and then you modify the light. We're going to do that with lenses. So I'm thinking the wants of what these lenses need to be able to do, excuse me, amongst everything else, is character, including lens flares. Maybe that's an anamorphic thing. What is we want that, J.J. Abrams goofy stuff, if we can get it. In addition to that, soft skin. Some lenses are really clinical, and some lenses are a little bit more forgiving to skin. The quality of the bokeh, the out of focus stuff in the background. Again, anamorphics kind of have an edge on this because they have their own look, but there's different lenses make different ways of shaping the out of background stuff, and there's ways to modify that. And then obviously lenses need to be sharp, which is going to disqualify a lot of sort of the cheaper cinema lenses because they're okay, but they're not as sharp as sort of the second tier up of cinema lenses. And let's talk about strategy. Yeah, like I said, I think the strategy needs to be the most clinical, most sharp, most sort of without character set of lenses that are just a good like base, like a modular base you can build from. So sharp, easy to work with, clinical for stuff that requires clinical, and then when you don't need the super sharpness and the super ability to block flares and stuff, you can start putting stuff in front of the lens that softens up the image, adds flares, that kind of thing. So let's go into sort of that logic. So default quality of these lenses that I'd be looking for, they got to be sharp or crisp. I think that's a thing. Like some of these cheaper, like the Mikeys and the DZO Vespids and all that kind of stuff, they're sharp, but they're not sharp, if that makes sense. They're considered sort of vintagey. So those might get disqualified just based on the fact that they're not sharp enough when you compare to something like a Zeiss lens or something like even Cook lenses, which are known to be fairly soft, are still crazy sharp. In addition to that, high contrast. It's sort of a known thing that vintage lenses tend to have lower contrast, and especially with color grading now, where you have a lot more control over contrast, even in post, you don't just have to light it for contrast. It's nice to have a contrasty lens. The lens I'm using right now is actually pretty contrasty, and I really like it, just because it gets you a lot of the way there with the look, Whereas older lenses, you have to really, light more aggressively or do a lot more post-production work to get the contrast where the image needs to be. In addition to that, neutral color rendition. It's not a deal breaker to have, Cook lenses skew a certain way. I believe RE lenses skew a certain way. I think Zeiss skew a little bit cool. Rokinons, don't they skew a little bit red? I forget. Canon lenses are known to skew red. So it's not a deal breaker, but they need to be color matched. So I guess neutral color rendition / color matched, because otherwise, what are we doing here? Yeah, older lenses are way less color matched. I've discovered old legacy. I got to handle some Panavision lenses back in the day, and they weren't even close to color matched, but they were sort of like a grab bag pile of lenses anyway. It was a cool set, but they were all different sizes, and a lot of them were different colors. In addition to that, resistance to flares. You can always add flares, but especially with anamorphics, like the flares. You don't have a lot of control over that, or you should have more control over it. But a good lens these days, you know, as long as you're not shooting light directly in, should be able to handle flares correctly. And if you need to, put a hood on or a matte box on to control flares, that's fine. But ideally, pretty good control over flares, because you can add flares back in later, either digitally or more likely with glass in front of the lens. Variety of focal lengths. This is more of a critique of like, especially the lower budget cinema lenses are coming out sort of lens by lens, and so a lot of these young brands only have like a 24, a 50, and an 85, which is great. I mean, you can do a lot of work with that, but if you're gonna spend, crazy, like inappropriately high amounts of money for cinema lenses, it's nice to have enough lenses to really cover a lot of situations. I myself am a sucker for 40 millimeter full frame, so 28 millimeter APS-C. I really like it. 28 millimeter is a pretty common lens, especially for vintage stuff, but you see a lot of full frame 40 millimeter lenses. I mean, only in the cinema space, really. But yeah, a bunch of focal lengths. I'd say probably 5 focal lengths, somewhere between, you know, 18 or 24 full frame equivalent on the wide, all the way going up to like probably like 85 or 135 for the long. You definitely need a 50 or something. Definitely need a 35 or something. I would even prefer a lens between, 24 and 35 if possible. Just because I like living in that world. But anyway, this is a 32 equivalent for what it's worth. Same or similar size. This is for weights. This is for filters. You'll find, I don't know why I'd say you'll find, but most cinema lenses, the thing that really sets them apart from, commodity consumer stills lenses is their consistent size. So when you put it on the camera, when you put it on the rig, you don't have to do a lot of adjustments. Same size, same weight, internal focusing, so that the weight distribution doesn't change much. Color match is part of that too. But yeah, it's similar size, at minimum, similar size and same front diameter to put lenses on or matte boxes on. That seems to be, ideal, really. And you'll find that with most cinema lenses, that's standardized. I think it's like an 82 millimeter front for lenses. I feel like, is that the number? I don't know. I have everything set to 77 millimeters right now, just because my Rokinon lenses are my big lenses, so everything steps up to 77. I think 77, 72, so maybe 72. So I can see what this says actually. What does it say? I can't tell. I can't read it. Oh, I have it right here. It is 77 millimeters. So, okay. Fast aperture. My definition of fast is probably going to be f2.0, especially if you're using like a modern cinema camera that's either Super 35 or full frame. You don't need a faster aperture than that anyway. As a matter of fact, an f2 on full frame is really difficult to focus. When I think of that stuff, I think of like the movie Rogue One, where there's just a little tiny focus plane all the time. Like everything is just about to be out of focus. So yeah, F2. I think F2 is fine. I don't think there's any reason to do like T 1.5 or T 1.3 or whatever. F 1.2, that kind of thing. And the last thing is adaptable, because these lenses need to be working as much as possible. So probably either a PL lens or maybe like a Canon EF or a Nikon F mount. That gives them the best chance of adapting to stuff. I feel like for money savings, it'll probably have to be a Canon EF, just because there's not that many full frame PL lenses out there, and the ones that are extremely expensive because PL is such an old standard that now there's even like LPL, which is a different standard. So even though most cinema cameras still use the standard PL mount, most of those cinema cameras are Super 35. So for the sake of these lenses being super rentable, I think they kind of need to be full frame. They need to fit on a full frame camera. So it'd be nice to have PL. Probably gonna end up being Canon EF. I wouldn't be opposed to Nikon F mount, because weirdly enough, if you get Nikon F mount lenses, you can adapt them to Canon EF. There's enough of a gap there. But other than the fact that Red is now owned by Nikon, Nikon doesn't really do cinema cameras, and so they really don't do cinema lenses. Maybe that'll change. Yeah. So let's talk about modifying lenses. Yeah, I think the big thing that I would ever want to modify a lens for, and the whole reason I was having this thought experiment, was anamorphic. Because usually, traditionally with cinema lenses, you either get spherical cinema lenses that have spherical bokeh out of focus things, or you get anamorphic lenses that have basically like oval shaped bokeh plus all the other anamorphic things, flares. The center focus is sharper than the side focus, that kind of thing. All the anamorphic stuff, which is fun, but anamorphic, it only really works for like narrative stuff. And so even though anamorphic is cool, it's super expensive, and it's even nichier than just cinema lenses to begin with. So the idea of just having a set of anamorphic lenses is awesome, but just not. I don't think it makes sense. You can get anamorphic adapters. I think that's the move. You get a sharp lens. If I was asked for an anamorphic look, and I was going to use these lenses that I've chosen, I would get an anamorphic front. You can find old, uh, I forget what they're called, but Panasonic had like a screw-on adapter for anamorphic lenses. I don't think it's big enough for full size cinema lenses, though. I don't think the front is big enough, because I think it's only like a 72 or a 77 millimeter, which is fine for me, but it's like for proper cinema lenses, it's not big enough. But I know they make some. I feel like SLR Magic makes one. So they make them. They're like $1,000. They're not perfect, and some of them you have an additional focusing ring, because you have to sort of do a focus dance, which is super annoying. But there is a way to mount an anamorphic front onto a spherical lens and have just the lens be the focusing thing. I know that's a thing, so that's what I would aim for. But to get it seamlessly working, I don't know how, but there's anamorphic guys out there that do this all the time. So that's what I would do. For money savings reasons, if just the anamorphic look was important and the actual like anamorphic workflow kind of not in the budget, kind of not in the plan, because it is a lot more work, especially if you have to focus the lens and the anamorphic lens. You can fake it. You can fake it with a glass panel in front that catches flares. You can also fake it in the back by putting a shape in the back to make oval bokeh. Yeah, I used to be really against that as an idea, but now, it's fine. You're I used to be afraid that if you put like an anamorphic shaped thing in the back of a lens, you're gonna lose so much light that you're gonna not have any idea what you're doing. In reality, a small change in light, especially in the color grade, is not going to be a huge difference. That's a pretty easy correction. So yeah, I think in most situations, a fake piece of anamorphic glass that, basically gives you lens flares in front and an anamorphic back in the back to give you, oval bokeh, and more or less you're good. There's not a lot of things that can mess up doing that. So I'm into that. Second one, similar to anamorphics, is flaring. Again, I think it would be trial and error to find the right glass with the right, angles of the lights shooting into the lens, but it can be done. Yeah, that's some lenses are a lot more likely to flare than others. Again, the cinema glass that I would prefer would not flare very much, if at all. But yeah, that's why you can put glass in front, and that's it. It not only has to do with the thickness of the glass and the shape of the glass, but also how far the glass is from the next piece of glass, because stuff bounces. It's a trial and error thing, and I think it's just find find the glass that works. I think that's cheaper than finding lenses that work, honestly. Bokeh, yeah, and I sort of talked about this with the anamorphics, with putting like an oval in the back element, like on the back element. You can do that. There's also adapters uh, where they actually have a manual aperture with specific shaped blades, more rounded blades. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially, more vintage lenses tend to have more angular blades a lot of times, but I don't have like a creative problem with, setting your aperture correctly, and then just having an external, aperture thing to close the blades to make the circle more smooth. I think that's fine. I don't see any problem with that. And then soft skin tones, glamour filters. We're going back to like the 1980s photography, but yeah, there's an entire, set of filters out there that all they do is mess with skin tones. Tiffin makes a bunch of them. I have the Black Pro Mist. I like it. I don't think it's ideal for skin tone stuff, but I think it's pretty usable. I believe Glimmer Glass does a very similar thing. I have a blur filter that I like to use sometimes, and it depends on what lens combination it's on to really work. But there's different ways you can lens skin tone stuff, and at the worst case scenario is you don't do it in camera, you have to do it in post, which annoys me as a colorist that you have to do it, but sometimes you have to do it, so that's fine. That's the shopping list. So the big thing is basically like a clinical perfect set of, like workhorse rental quality cinema lenses that, if nothing else, if somebody called and said, I need cinema lenses that are just going to be perfect, because we can always mess it up later. That's the kind of lenses I want. I think it's going to end up being Zeiss. I'll start, doing the internet search now. So after much messy review, I ended up on Duclos lenses. Love those guys. Um, I think from most expensive to least expensive, these are the kits that I would do. So this first kit, most expensive one, is probably the one that I would do if I was really going for it, just because it doesn't have any problems, and that is the Sigma full frame primes. Excuse me. They're T1.5 basically across the whole range except for the 14 millimeter. They're not cheap. They're, between 3,500 and what, 45,000, 3,500, 5,000 per lens. Pretty expensive. But yeah, we got a 14, a 20, a 24, a 28, 35, 40, 50, 65, 85. So it's a whole wild group. Let's just see how much the 35 or 35. Yeah, so it does do PL and Canon EF. So yeah, I think that's the move. So I call a set of 5. What's 35 times 5? 15 plus another, so a 10. Let's just do the math. Hold on. Shame on me. So, So 17,000, basically $20,000 out the door for the lenses, but they're perfect. That's the idea. And if you need to get more, if you need to rent additional ones, they have a bunch of different sizes. Yeah. Wow, some of these are really intense too. These ones that have feet on them. Anyway, so there's that. So there's Sigma Classic, and then there's the Sigma, just regular ones. Interesting. So the classics are, maybe I was looking at the classics a while ago. Didn't matter. Anyway, so eight. So we'll do this. We'll do 20K 5. Okay. I think the next on the list is going to be the Zeiss. Obviously the CP3s are used CP2s, but I believe CP2s are only Super 35. It's got to be, I think the Milvis is going to be the only real chance, because the Otis are too expensive and the Supremes are too expensive. So they're photo lenses, but they're really not. So I believe they're all T. Now they bounce around, either f1.4 or f2. That's still fine though. I mean, honestly, even if they were all f2, that'd probably be okay. So an 85. Yeah. Anyway, let's look at the 35 f2, and so Nikon F, but it can be converted to EF. So it's not. It needs to be modded, but again, as long as it's not, it'd be better if it was PL, but it's a lot cheaper this way. So we'll say $1,700 a lens, just because there's a lot. Let me just see if there's a full set here. So we got 15, 18, 21, 25, 35, 50, 85. So it's not exactly the comprehensive set I would want, but it's pretty decent. So we'll call it 1,700 times 5. It's a lot cheaper. So probably $10,000 out the door, including taxes and everything. So we'll do that. Zeiss Milvis. Nisi, a 14, a 25, a 35, a 15, and 85. So this is an example of a little bit newer of a company. They're still adding lenses to their list. A 5-lens kit is going to be about $6,000, which is pretty nice. REPL, and you can do everything else is mirrorless, so it would have to be REPL. Okay. Anyway, Nisi Athenas, they're all about TF2, right? Yeah, T1.9. So the wide ones are a little bit more, but that's okay. So we'll do Nisi at about 1,200. So call it. Well, we know it's a $6,000 prime 5 prime set. So. And then Mikey, as much as I've hated on Mikey for this, you can't knock the fact that they're pretty solid. They're just, I don't know. As an owner operator, maybe, but if I were to really make these like fully rentable, like, these are not a jack of all trades, because they're just not sharp enough and they're just not established enough. So even though, excuse me, I think they're very cool. I just, yeah. 24, 35, 50, 85, 105, 135. Yeah, again, I wish there was something between either a 28 or like a 40 or a 42, maybe a 75. Yeah. So, call it $1,200. just to be safe. 6 grand again for that, but it's not. It's more like, call it $1,100 actually. So 5,500. Yeah. So Mikey. And so that's really the issue is the Mikeys are not that much cheaper than the Niseys, which seem to be a lot better. Spelled that